My family told me that since I was single, I should move into the guest room of the house I bought so my brother and his wife could have the master suite. They expected me to be a dutiful daughter and sister. Instead, I called my lawyer and drafted a little welcome gift they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The scent of my mother's roast chicken usually meant comfort. It was the smell of Sunday afternoons, of lazy conversations, and the gentle clinking of silverware. But that day, the aroma felt heavy, cloying, like a sweet poison filling the air in my parents' dining room. I sat at the familiar oak table, a dull throb behind my eyes that had been my constant companion for a week. I'd been working 18-hour days to finalize a massive project, a demanding UX/UI overhaul for a major banking client. The stress had manifested as a splitting headache, a persistent weariness that had settled deep into my bones. All I wanted was to go home to my home and sink into the quiet solitude I had worked so hard to build. Just 2 months prior, at 29, I had closed on my first house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. A charming 2-bedroom bungalow with a small garden, a cozy fireplace, and a master bedroom that caught the morning sun perfectly. Every penny saved, every late night worked, every sacrifice made over the last 7 years had been poured into that down payment. It was my sanctuary, the physical embodiment of my independence. "Elara, dear, you're quiet today," my mother said, her voice laced with that specific tone of concern that always preceded a request. I forced a smile, pushing a roasted potato around my plate. "Just tired, Mom. It's been a long week at work." My father grunted in acknowledgement from the head of the table. "That's our Elara, always working." There was a hint of pride in his voice, but it was the kind of pride one has for a reliable tool, not a daughter. My brother, Liam, sat opposite me, his arm draped possessively around his wife, Chloe. They had gotten married 6 months ago in a wedding I'd helped pay for. Chloe, with her perfectly curated Instagram life and a smile that never quite reached her eyes, offered me a look of practiced sympathy. "You work too hard, Elara. You need to learn to relax." "I'll relax when my mortgage is paid off," I said, trying for a lighthearted tone that fell flat in the suddenly tense room. Liam cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. He exchanged a look with Chloe, a silent, rehearsed signal that made the hair on my arms stand up. This was it, the ambush. I could feel it coiling in the air, thick and suffocating. "Actually, speaking of your house," Liam began, his voice taking on a magnanimous quality, as if he were about to bestow a great gift upon me. "Chloe and I have some wonderful news. We've decided to move in with you." The clatter of my fork against my plate was the only sound for a moment. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "You've what?" "We're moving in," Chloe chirped, clapping her hands together. "Our lease is up at the end of the month, and the rent is just outrageous. It makes no sense for us to keep throwing money away when you have all that space." I looked from my brother's beaming face to my parents, who were nodding encouragingly. My mind was a chaotic swirl of disbelief and rising anger. They hadn't asked. They had informed me. I don't have all that space, Liam," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's a 2-bedroom house. I use the second bedroom as my home office." "Exactly," Liam said, as if I had just proven his point. "You can easily move your desk into a corner of the living room. And that's the other thing we wanted to talk about, to make sure it works for everyone." He leaned forward, his expression serious now, as if he were a CEO outlining a corporate merger. "Chloe and I, as a married couple starting our life, obviously need a bit more room. So it makes the most sense for us to take the master bedroom. You can have the guest room. It's cozier for one person anyway." The room fell silent again. The dull throb in my head sharpened into a piercing spike. He wanted me to move out of my own master bedroom. The room I had painted myself, the room where I had finally unpacked the last box and felt the profound, soul-deep relief of being home. He wanted me to move into the tiny guest room, the one I had set up for when my parents occasionally stayed over. He wanted to relegate me to the status of a visitor in my own house. My mother chose that moment to chime in, her voice smooth and placating. "It's just practical, Elara. You're by yourself. They need the ensuite bathroom. It's your duty to help your brother. Family helps family." My father nodded his solemn agreement. "Your sister is right. We've always taken care of Liam. Now it's your turn to step up." I looked at their faces, a united front of cheerful, unyielding entitlement. They saw my success not as my own, but as a communal resource they could tap at will. My hard work wasn't for my security, it was for their convenience. My sanctuary wasn't a home, it was an asset to be divided. They weren't asking for help, they were staging a hostile takeover. The roast chicken on my plate suddenly seemed grotesque, a symbol of this family feast where I was the main course. I felt a cold wave of clarity wash over me, extinguishing the initial shock and leaving behind a chilling, hard resolve. They saw me as a pushover, the responsible daughter who would always sigh and give in. They had made a grave miscalculation. I slowly placed my napkin on the table, the simple movement feeling monumental. I looked directly at my brother, then at his smiling wife, and finally at my parents. The exhaustion, the headache, the years of quiet resentment, it all coalesced into a single, silent promise I made to myself. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had just declared war on my life, and I had no intention of surrendering. The betrayal was worse than any stress-induced illness. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and a silent, screaming monologue inside my head. I walked into my house, and the quiet felt different. It was no longer peaceful. It was fragile, threatened. I leaned against the front door, the cool wood a small comfort against my back, and surveyed the living room. The soft gray walls I'd agonized over, the comfortable sofa I'd saved for a year to buy, the bookshelf filled with my favorite novels, it all felt tainted by their audacious plan. I was a stranger in my own future. My phone buzzed a few hours later. It was my mother. I ignored the first call, but she was persistent. On the third ring, I answered, bracing myself. "Elara, you left so abruptly. I hope you're not upset," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "Upset," I repeated, my own voice hollow. "Mom, Liam and Chloe announced they were taking over my house and kicking me out of my bedroom. Why would I be upset?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she sighed, the familiar sound of her dismissal scraping against my raw nerves. "Nobody is kicking you out. We're just trying to find a solution that helps everyone. Liam is your brother. He's a creative, a freelance artist. His income isn't as stable as yours. Chloe is trying to build her brand. They need a supportive environment." A supportive environment. My home. The two concepts felt mutually exclusive at that moment. And what about my supportive environment? I just spent the last 2 months working myself into the ground. I'm exhausted. I bought this house so I could have peace, Mom, not to run a free hotel for my brother and his wife. "It's temporary," she insisted, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Just until they get on their feet. You have to be more generous, Elara. You've always been so rigid about things, about your money, your space. It's not a good look." The conversation ended as it always did, with me feeling selfish and unreasonable, and with her feeling martyred and misunderstood. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. The sheer gaslighting was breathtaking. They had reframed their outrageous entitlement as a flaw in my character. My prudence was rigidity. My boundaries were a lack of generosity. The next evening, Liam and Chloe came over, unannounced. I opened the door to find them standing on my porch, holding a tape measure. "Hey, sis," Liam said, breezing past me into the foyer. Chloe followed, her eyes sweeping across my living room with a critical gaze. "We just wanted to get a feel for the space," Chloe said, tapping a perfectly manicured nail against her chin. "I'm thinking a large sectional would be much better here. This sofa is a bit small, and these walls could use a pop of color. Maybe a feature wall in teal." She was talking about redecorating. She was standing in the middle of my living room, a room I had lovingly and meticulously designed to be my calm, neutral-toned haven, and was talking about painting a feature wall in teal. Liam, meanwhile, had walked straight into my master bedroom. I followed, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He was using the tape measure on the wall where my bed stood. "Just checking dimensions," he said casually, not even looking at me. "Our king-size bed should fit here, but the bedside tables might be a tight squeeze. No big deal, we can get new ones." I stood in the doorway, frozen. The audacity was so profound it was almost surreal. They were not just planning to move in, they were erasing me. They were painting over my walls, replacing my furniture, taking my bed. My entire identity within these four walls was being systematically dismantled before I'd even had a chance to fully build it. "Liam, this is my room," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. He finally turned to me, an expression of mild annoyance on his face. "We went over this, Elara. It's the only thing that makes sense. Don't make this difficult. We're family." Chloe drifted into the room, linking her arm through his. "We're so excited. It's going to be so much fun, all of us living together. Think of it, Elara. You won't be so lonely anymore." Lonely? The word hit me like a slap. I wasn't lonely. I was independent. I was content. I was, for the first time in my life, truly, peacefully on my own. They saw my solitude as a deficiency, a problem they could solve by invading it. They left soon after, chattering about paint swatches and furniture catalogs, leaving a vortex of bewildered rage in their wake. I sank onto my bed, and stared at the wall Liam had just measured for his own. The initial shock was hardening into something else, something cold and sharp. They saw me as a doormat, a resource, a stepping stone. They saw a quiet, hardworking woman and assumed she was weak. They assumed my desire for peace meant I would avoid conflict at any cost. I laid there for a long time as the evening sun faded, the anger churning inside me. They had the numbers, with my parents backing them. They had the emotional leverage, the years of ingrained family dynamics. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that the same meticulous planning and relentless drive that allowed me to buy this house at 29 could be used for other things, too. The foundation of my family was built on a simple, unspoken rule. Liam's needs came first. He was the boy, the charming, creative one who floated through life on a cloud of potential that never seemed to result in actual achievement. I was the girl, the practical, responsible one. My role was to be the safety net, the stable ground he could land on when his dreams inevitably faltered. I remembered being 12 and saving up my allowance for months to buy a telescope I desperately wanted. The day I had enough money, my mother sat me down. Liam's school trip to the capital was coming up, and they were short on the fee. "He'll be so disappointed to be the only one left behind," she'd said, her eyes pleading. "You understand, don't you, dear?" My telescope money became Liam's trip money. He came back with a souvenir shirt and didn't say thank you. I never got the telescope. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. The money I earned from my first part-time job went towards his expensive art supplies. The small scholarship I won for college was absorbed into the general family fund because Liam had decided to attend a private design school with a hefty tuition. My parents' logic was always the same. My path was secure, his was artistic and fragile. It was my duty to support his gift. My profession as a UX/UI designer was, in their eyes, a testament to my practicality. It was a solid, high-paying tech job, something they could boast about to their friends. They never once asked about the passion behind it, the love for creating seamless, intuitive experiences, the satisfaction of solving complex problems with clean, elegant design. To them, my career was just a reliable income stream. An income stream that, by extension, belonged to the family. When I announced I was buying a house, their reaction was a strange mix of pride and apprehension. "All by yourself. That's wonderful, dear," my mother had said, but her smile was strained. I see now that they weren't seeing my achievement. They were seeing a resource being locked away behind a front door to which they didn't have a key. Then came Chloe. I met her for the first time a year ago, at one of Liam's rare art showcases. She was beautiful, polished, and radiated an aura of supreme confidence. She worked as a social media influencer, a job that seemed to consist of taking artful photos of expensive lattes and sponsored clothing. She latched onto Liam, praising his raw, untapped genius with a fervor that made him blush and preen. From the beginning, I felt a dissonance with Chloe. Her compliments were always double-edged. "Oh, Elara, your job sounds so stable. It must be nice not to have to worry about money," she'd say, implying her own life of chasing passion was somehow more noble. She had a way of asking questions that felt like interrogations. "So, this house, is it a good investment? What's the property value in that neighborhood like? Are you planning to do any renovations?" Her interest wasn't in my happiness, but in the asset specifications. She was an expert at a particular brand of passive aggression. She would praise my thriftiness in a way that made it sound like I was cheap. "I just love how you find such amazing bargains, Elara. I could never be that disciplined. I just adore beautiful things too much." The implication was clear. Her taste was refined, while mine was simply boo. Get conscious. The most unsettling incident happened about a month before their wedding. We were at my parents' house, and I was showing them a photo of the new standing desk I had bought for my home office. "I can't wait to have a dedicated workspace," Dee said excitedly. Chloe had glanced at the photo on my phone and then looked at Liam. "See, honey, Elara has a whole room just for work. We can barely fit one desk in our tiny apartment. It really holds your creativity back, not having a proper studio space." Liam had immediately picked up the thread. "She's right, I can't focus there. If I had a real studio, I could be so much more productive." My parents, of course, had chimed in with a chorus of sympathetic agreement. The conversation had quickly turned into a brainstorming session about how I could better support my brother's artistic career. At the time, I brushed it off as typical family dynamics. Now, I see it for what it was: the first calculated move in Chloe's long game. She wasn't just marrying Liam, she was marrying into what she perceived as his family's resources, namely me. She had identified me as the family bank and saw my new house as the main vault, ripe for the plundering. Her manipulation of Liam was masterful. She fed his inherent sense of entitlement, framing their desires as noble needs and my boundaries as selfish obstacles. She was the architect of this invasion, and my brother was her willing, clueless accomplice. For 2 days after their unannounced measuring visit, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I went to work, I attended meetings, I moved pixels around on a screen, but my mind was elsewhere. It was cycling through a loop of anger, disbelief, and a profound, aching sadness. The family I thought I had, the one that was supposed to be my anchor, had revealed itself to be a weight, intent on pulling me under. The turning point came on Wednesday night. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes I hadn't gotten to yet, when Chloe posted a new picture on her Instagram. It was a photo of her and Liam, smiling radiantly. The caption read, "Big life changes coming soon. So excited to be starting our next chapter in a beautiful new space where we can finally grow. New beginnings, couple goals, macking get home." The audacity of it cracked something open inside me. She was publicly claiming my home as her own before she had even moved in. She was curating a narrative of a perfect life, built on the foundation of my hard work and my silence. The sadness that had been fogging my mind evaporated, replaced by a sharp, cold fury. Passive victimhood was no longer an option. I was a designer. I solved problems. And this was the biggest problem I had ever faced. My first thought was to simply change the locks and send them a text, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple. My parents would descend, there would be scenes, accusations, and endless, grinding emotional blackmail. They would paint me as the villain, the cruel sister who cast her struggling brother out into the cold. I needed a better solution. I needed a strategy. My mind, trained to think in systems and logic, started to analyze the situation. Their weakness was their arrogance. They saw me as an emotional, easily manipulated pushover. They would not be expecting a logical, calculated response. Their strength was the appeal to family. I needed to find a way to neutralize that, to shift the argument onto territory where I was stronger, the territory of facts, figures, and the law. The phrase echoed in my head, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten I wasn't just the responsible daughter. I was a senior designer at a top firm. I negotiated contracts. I dealt with difficult stakeholders. I built systems designed to be foolproof. I would build one now. The next morning, I took a personal day. My first call was not to my family, but to a lawyer. I found a highly rated firm specializing in property and tenancy law. I sat in a sleek, modern office, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of my life, and laid out the entire situation for a woman named Ms. Albright. She was sharp, composed, and listened without a hint of judgment as I recounted the Sunday dinner, the tape measure incident, and the Instagram post. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Well, that's quite a predicament, Ms. Vance. Legally, they have no claim to your property. You could simply refuse them entry. However, given the family dynamics you've described, I concur that a more structured approach might be beneficial." "Structured how?" I asked, leaning forward. "They want to live in your house." "Fine," she said, a glint in her eye. "Let's treat them as what they would be, tenants, or more precisely, licensees. We will draft a formal cohabitation agreement. It will protect you, your property, and your financial investment. And it will set clear, legally binding expectations for all parties." A plan began to form in my mind, elegant and precise. "They'll never agree to sign a formal lease," I said. "They're expecting everything for free." "That's the beauty of it," Ms. Albright replied with a thin smile. "We won't present it as a lease, we'll frame it as simple house rules. A document to ensure everyone lives together harmoniously. We'll keep the language accessible, but the clauses will be ironclad. We can stipulate rules regarding guests, property alterations, noise levels, and financial contributions." "Financial contributions?" I asked, intrigued. "Of course. We'll set a modest monthly rent, not enough to be punitive, but enough to legally establish a landlord-tenant relationship. Let's say $500 a month to cover their share of utilities and wear and tear. It's eminently reasonable. If they balk at that, they reveal their true intentions immediately." The most important part of the plan, the clever trap itself, was the termination clause. Ms. Albright explained we could include specific conditions under which their right to reside in the house would be immediately terminated. Things like unauthorized parties, causing damage to the property, non-payment of their contribution, or harassment of the primary homeowner. "They will be so focused on the perceived victory of moving in," Ms. Albright concluded, "that I highly doubt they will read the fine print. They'll see a document about house rules, assume it's a formality, and sign it without a second thought." Leaving her office, I felt a surge of power I hadn't felt in days. The fog of helplessness had lifted. I was no longer just reacting to their demands, I was setting the terms. I was designing the system in which they would have to operate. That evening, I called my brother. "Liam," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I've had some time to think, and you're right, family should help family. You and Chloe can move in at the end of the month." The whoop of joy on his end of the line was deafening. "I knew you'd come around. Elara, thank you, you won't regret this." "I'm sure I won't," I said, a cool resolve settling over me. "I'm just going to send over a little document with some basic house rules, just so we're all on the same page. To keep things from getting awkward, you know? Just sign it and send it back to me." Yeah, of course. No problem," he said dismissively, his mind already picturing himself in my master bedroom. "Anything you need, sis." I hung up the phone, a small, grim smile on my face. The trap was baited. All they had to do was walk into it. A week later, the signed document arrived in my inbox, a scanned PDF attached to a breezy email from Liam. "All signed and ready to go. See you on the 31st. The document was signed in 2 places, Liam's careless scrawl and Chloe's looping, ostentatious signature. I forwarded it immediately to Ms. Albright for safekeeping and printed a hard copy for my own files. They hadn't even asked a single question. The trap had been set, and the first phase was a complete success. I spent the next 2 weeks in a strange state of methodical preparation. I moved all my personal belongings from the master bedroom into the guest room. Each item I packed, my favorite lamp, the books from my nightstand, the art I'd hung on the walls, felt like a small surrender, but I reminded myself it was a strategic retreat, not a defeat. I set up my workspace in a corner of the dining room, a constant, visible reminder of the disruption to my life. On moving day, my parents arrived with Liam and Chloe, their faces beaming with pride. They acted as if they had brokered a brilliant peace treaty. My father clapped Liam on the back, while my mother directed the placement of their furniture as if she were the lady of the manor. "The king bed will look much better against that wall, Liam," she instructed, pointing to the main wall in my master bedroom. Chloe flitted around the house, making pronouncements. "This entry table has to go, it's so dated, and we absolutely must get a new rug for the living room, this one is so drab." I gritted my teeth and said nothing, playing the part of the gracious, if slightly overwhelmed host. I helped them carry boxes, offered them drinks, and endured their endless stream of plans for improving my house. Throughout it all, I felt a detached sense of calm. I was an observer in my own life, documenting every detail, every casual insult, every act of breathtaking entitlement. The first major confrontation didn't take long. It happened 3 days after they moved in. I came home from a long day at work to find my small, gray sofa gone from the living room. In its place stood a monstrous, teal-colored sectional, so large it practically filled the entire room. Chloe was perched on one of the cushions, scrolling through her phone. "What is this? Where is my sofa?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Chloe looked up nonplussed. "Oh, it's amazing, right? It was delivered today. The other one was just so sad. I sold it online this morning. Don't worry, I got a pretty good price for it. I'll put it towards our first utility payment." I stared at her dumbfounded. She had sold my sofa, my property, without asking. "You sold my sofa." "Well, it wasn't going to fit with the new aesthetic," she said defensively, as if that were a perfectly logical explanation. "Besides, this is our home now, too. We need to make it feel like ours." Liam walked in from the kitchen, a bowl of cereal in his hand. "Hey, the new couch is here. Looks great, Chloe." He saw my face and his smile faltered. "What's wrong?" "She sold my sofa, Liam." He looked from me to Chloe. "Well, yeah, we talked about it. This one is way better. More space for when we have people over." This was the moment. My first opportunity to reveal the framework they had so carelessly ignored. I walked over to the bookshelf where I kept my file, pulled out my copy of the cohabitation agreement, and opened it to page 3. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear, "let's talk about what we agreed to." I held the document out. "This is the house rules document you both signed. Perhaps you should have read it more carefully. I'd like to draw your attention to Clause 4B under Property and Alterations." I began to read aloud. "No alterations to the property, including but not limited to painting, redecorating, or the removal, sale, or disposal of the homeowner's personal property, shall be made without prior written consent from the homeowner, Elara Vance." Liam and Chloe exchanged a confused look. "What is that?" Liam asked, frowning. "It's a legally binding agreement, Liam," I said flatly. "The one you signed. It outlines the terms of your stay here. And you, Chloe, have just breached it by selling my property." Chloe's confident smirk vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Don't be ridiculous. That was just a formality, a piece of paper." "On the contrary," I said, flipping to the last page, "this piece of paper outlines specific consequences for breaches. It's not a suggestion box. It's a contract." Her face flushed with anger. The mask of sweet, bubbly influencer slipped, revealing something ugly and grasping beneath. "This is insane. You tricked us. You're trying to control us in our own home." "Let me be perfectly clear," I said, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "This is not your home. You are guests here under specific terms that you both agreed to. You do not get to sell my furniture. You do not get to dictate the decor. And you are, as of this moment, in violation of our agreement." Liam looked utterly lost. Elara, come on, it's just a couch. Today it's a couch. Tomorrow, what will it be? My car? My television? I looked directly at Chloe, whose eyes were flashing with rage. This is your first and only warning. There will not be a second. Read the document you signed. Follow the rules, or this arrangement will be over before it's even truly begun. I left the document on the coffee table in front of the hideous new sofa and walked away, my heart hammering but my resolve solid as steel. The confrontation had been draining, but it had achieved its purpose. I had revealed the trap. I had shown them that the piece of paper had teeth. Chloe's immediate, furious reaction, the accusations, the poorly executed lies about it being a misunderstanding, only served to confirm what I already knew. She wasn't interested in sharing a home. She was interested in conquering it, and I had just shown her that this territory was defended. The week following the sofa confrontation was thick with a tense, cold silence. Chloe communicated with me only through passive-aggressive notes left on the counter. Reminder, please empty the dishwasher. We all need to do our part. And loud, pointed phone calls to her friends where she complained about her controlling, difficult living situation. Liam, for his part, tried to act as a peacemaker, telling me to just be a little more flexible and telling Chloe to try to see things from Elara's side. He was a man caught in a current, trying desperately to swim in two directions at once. They did, however, pay the $500 rent stipulated in the agreement, though Chloe made a great show of handing me the cash with a sigh, as if it were a grand sacrifice. I deposited it and meticulously recorded the transaction. Every small interaction was another piece of evidence, another brick in the wall I was building around myself. Chloe's attempts to regain control became more desperate, though slightly more subtle. She began inviting her influencer friends over for collaboration sessions multiple times a week. They would take over the living room, her living room, in her mind, for hours, talking loudly, rearranging my remaining furniture for their photo shoots, and leaving a trail of coffee cups and snack wrappers in their wake. Is was a direct violation of Clause 5A. Guests are permitted, but any gathering of more than 4 individuals must be approved by the homeowner 24 hours in advance. I took photos of the gatherings from the doorway of my makeshift office, timestamping each one. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I was scheduled to go on a weekend work retreat. I reminded Liam and Chloe that under Clause 5C, they were not to host any overnight guests or parties while I was away. They both agreed readily. A little too readily. An old friend from my neighborhood, Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who enjoyed watching the street from her window, had my number for emergencies. On Saturday night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. Elara, dear, I don't mean to be a bother, but there is quite a large, loud party happening at your house. I thought you should know. My blood ran cold. I called Liam. He didn't answer. I called Chloe. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I spent the rest of the night staring at my hotel room ceiling, my mind a storm of fury. I had given them clear rules, a formal agreement, and a direct warning. They had responded with utter contempt. I drove home early Sunday morning. The scene was worse than I could have imagined. The front lawn was littered with red plastic cups. Inside, the house smelled of stale beer and pizza. There was a dark stain on the living room rug, the one Chloe hated, and a noticeable chip in the corner of my wooden dining table. In the kitchen, the sink was overflowing with dirty dishes. I walked through the silent, trashed house, my phone out, documenting everything. The chipped table, the stained rug, the overflowing garbage cans. I found a scuff mark on the wall in the hallway where something had clearly been knocked into it. Each photo was a nail in their coffin. Liam and Chloe finally emerged from the master bedroom around noon, looking bleary-eyed and disheveled. They froze when they saw me standing there, my arms crossed. Elara, you're back early, Liam stammered, guilt written all over his face. The retreat ended, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. It appears you had one of your own. Chloe immediately went on the offensive. It was not a party. It was a small get-together. It just got a little out of hand. A small get-together? I asked, holding up my phone to show her a picture of the trashed living room. "This looks like a party to me, a direct violation of the agreement you signed, not to mention the damage to my property." This was the second major confrontation, and I was fully prepared. As they launched into a series of denials and excuses, I simply stood my ground, presenting the irrefutable proof. "There's a chip in my table, Chloe. There's a stain on my rug. There are scuff marks on my walls. This is precisely the kind of behavior that Clause 7, property damage and care, was written to prevent." Liam looked genuinely distressed. He kept muttering apologies, saying he didn't mean for it to get so crazy. He was struggling, torn between his loyalty to his wife and the undeniable fact that they were completely in the wrong. Chloe, however, doubled down. "Oh my goodness, it's a tiny chip. You are making such a big deal out of nothing. This is what happens when people live in a house. Things get messy. You are so uptight, Elara. We can't live like this, walking on eggshells all the time." Her tirade was exactly what I needed. It wasn't an apology. It was a declaration that she had no intention of ever respecting me, my home, or our agreement. The spell she had over Liam was beginning to crack. He looked at her, then at the mess surrounding them, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was finally seeing the disconnect between the life she promised and the chaos she created. "That's enough," I said, my voice cutting through her rant. "The damage is done, and it has been documented." I turned and walked to my room, closing the door behind me. They had just given me everything I needed. The case was built. The final act was about to begin. The following Saturday, I called for a family meeting. I told my parents it was urgent, that things with Liam and Chloe had reached a breaking point, and I needed their help to mediate. They arrived, primed to defend their son, their expressions a mixture of concern and stern disapproval directed at me. Liam and Chloe sat on the monstrous teal sofa, Chloe looking defiant, Liam looking miserable. I had arranged the living room carefully. In the center of the coffee table, I placed a single folder. The trashed remnants of the party had been cleaned, but the evidence of the damage, the chipped table, the stained rug, remained, subtle but damning. I wanted the setting to be calm and almost clinical. This wasn't going to be a shouting match. It was going to be an execution. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice even. "I asked you here because the living arrangement is not working. CHL. O and Liam have expressed that they feel I am being too rigid, and I feel that they are not respecting the terms of our agreement." My mother immediately jumped in. "Elara, you have to learn to compromise. A house needs to be lived in. A little mess from a party is not the end of the world. Your brother deserves to feel at home." "I agree," I said calmly, which took her by surprise. "He does deserve to feel at home, but this is not his home. It is mine. And when they moved in, we all agreed to a certain set of rules to ensure we could coexist peacefully." Chloe scoffed. "You mean the ridiculous contract you tricked us into signing?" "Tricked?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You are both educated adults. Did you not read the document before you signed it?" I opened the folder on the table and slid a copy of the signed agreement across to my parents. "Please, take a look." My father picked it up, his brow furrowed as he began to read. My mother peered over his shoulder. I saw the moment their expressions shifted from confident indignation to confusion. "This agreement," I continued, my voice acting as a calm narration to their reading, which I had reviewed by a lawyer, outlines some very simple expectations. A modest financial contribution to utilities, which they have made. I paused. It also outlines rules regarding guests, property alterations, and care for the home. I then pulled out the next set of documents from my folder, the printed, time-stamped photos. I laid them out on the table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. Here are photos from 3 separate occasions this month when more than 4 guests were present without my approval, a violation of Clause 5A. Here, I added, placing the photos of the party's aftermath on top, is evidence of the unauthorized party that took place last weekend while I was away, a violation of Clause 5C. And here, I pointed to the chip in the table, Is the resulting property damage a violation of Clause 7? A heavy silence descended on the room. My parents stared at the evidence, their arguments dying on their lips. The facts were clear, simple, and undeniable. But the most significant violation, I said, looking directly at Chloe, was the unauthorized sale of my property, my sofa, which is a breach of Clause 4B. My mother looked up, her face pale. She sold your sofa. For a pretty good price, I believe, I said, my eyes still locked on Chloe. Chloe's composure finally shattered. This is unbelievable. It was an old, ugly couch. I was doing you a favor. You are turning this family against me with your stupid, petty rules. And then, the moment of truth. Liam, who had been silent and ashen-faced throughout the entire presentation, slowly stood up. He looked at the evidence on the table, then at his wife's face, contorted with rage, and something inside him finally broke. "She's right, Chloe," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It was her couch. It was her house. I told you we shouldn't have the party." "What?" Chloe shrieked, turning on him. "You're taking her side? After everything I've done for us. I am trying to build us a life, and you're letting your uptight sister ruin it." "What life?" Liam shot back, his voice rising with a pain that had clearly been building for weeks. "A life where we live off my sister, where we sell her things and throw parties in her house behind her back. This isn't a life, Chloe. It's theft." The word hung in the air, stunning everyone into silence. He had finally seen it. He had named the truth of their situation. With everyone watching, I reached into the folder one last time. I pulled out 2 identical documents and placed them on the coffee table in front of Liam and Chloe. "This is a formal, legal notice of eviction," I said, my voice resonating with finality. "Per the termination clause, Section 9 of the agreement you both signed, you have breached the terms of your residency. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. It's all perfectly legal. My lawyer has already reviewed it." My parents were speechless. Chloe stared at the papers as if they were venomous snakes. Liam just looked down at the floor, defeated but somehow relieved. The public, systematic dismantling of their entitlement was complete. I had not raised my voice. I had not resorted to emotional appeals. I had simply presented the truth, backed by the very rules they had agreed to. The trap, so carefully set, had closed, and the final, triumphant click echoed in the silent room. The 30 days that followed were the most excruciatingly awkward of my life. Chloe refused to speak to me, communicating only through slammed doors and muttered insults just loud enough for me to hear. My parents tried to intervene, calling me daily with alternating pleas and accusations. "You're tearing this family apart, Elara," my mother cried. "Can't you find it in your heart to forgive them?" "Forgiveness and consequences are too different." "NT things, Mom," I replied calmly, repeating the phrase like a mantra. "They can have my forgiveness when they're standing in their own apartment, not my living room." Liam was a ghost in the house. He packed their belongings in silence, his shoulders perpetually slumped. One evening, about a week before they were due to leave, he knocked on the door of the guest room, my temporary bedroom. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. I gestured for him to come in. He stood awkwardly by the door, unable to meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Elara," he said, his voice thick with shame. I never saw it. I just went along. It was easier." "What changed, Liam?" I asked, genuinely curious. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a dawning, painful clarity. "When you laid out all those photos, all that proof, I realized we didn't look like a couple starting their life. We looked like con artists. And when Chloe started screaming about the couch instead of just apologizing, I saw that she didn't feel bad about what she did. She was just angry she got caught." He told me they were moving into a small, overpriced apartment on the other side of town. Chloe was furious about it, blaming him, blaming me, blaming everyone but herself. Their perfect life narrative had crumbled. "I think," he said quietly, "this might be the best thing that could have happened to us, or at least to me." It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. I didn't offer to let them stay. The boundary I had built was too new, too important, but I did offer him a sliver of grace. I hope you figure things out, Liam. I'll always be your sister. On the last day of the month, they moved out. I stood at the window and watched the moving truck pull away, a profound sense of relief washing over me. The house was quiet again, but this time, the quiet was not fragile. It was strong. It was mine. The first thing I did was hire a professional cleaning crew. They scrubbed the house from top to bottom, erasing every last physical trace of my unwelcome tenants. The next day, I had the hideous teal sofa hauled away and donated. I went online and bought myself the exact same gray sofa Chloe had sold, a small but deeply satisfying act of reclamation. Then, I began the slow, joyful process of moving back into my master bedroom. As I unpacked my things, arranging my books on my nightstand and hanging my art back on the walls, I felt a sense of ownership I hadn't even felt when I first moved in. I had not just bought this house, I had defended it. I had fought for it. The fallout with my parents was significant. They were distant and cold for months. But with Liam and Chloe out of the picture, their enabling behavior had no target. Slowly, tentatively, they began to come around. They saw me thriving, happy, and at peace in my own home, and they could not deny the evidence. Our relationship is still strained, but it is more honest than it has ever been. As for Liam and Chloe, their story took another turn. Faced with the reality of paying their own bills without a safety net, their relationship fractured. Liam got a full-time job at a marketing agency, trading his unstable freelance dreams for a steady paycheck. Chloe, unable to maintain her influencer lifestyle without the backdrop of my beautiful home and the subsidy of my generosity, eventually left him. Last I heard, she had moved back in with her parents. Tonight, I am sitting in my living room on my comfortable gray sofa with a cup of tea. The house is silent, filled only with the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. I have my space, my peace, and my independence. I learned that my home is not just a collection of walls and furniture, it's a boundary. It's the line that defines where I end and the unreasonable demands of the world begin. And I learned that the same skills I use to design elegant solutions at work can be used to design a life, one that is secure, peaceful, and entirely my own. The door is firmly locked, not out of fear, but out of a deep and abiding respect for the person who lives inside.